Hi everyone, it's Heath with the Music Technology Teacher Network, www.mutechteachernet.com. And I'm really happy to be filming this video today back in my lab as I'm getting ready for the start of another school year. And for the first time in several years, I'm not having to totally reinstall or redesign or reset up my lab. So a lot of things are ready to go, which is great, which means I have time to continue making some videos for everybody. So I've been putting together this series of videos about the Launchpad Mini, and I want to continue to do that with this video and show you one of the things that really excites me the most about the Mini, which is the flexibility and the customization that you can do with this device. So I'm going to show you a few things about what you're going to do to get that device registered and some of these other assets and resources that you're going to have access to. I'm in the process now of communicating with some folks at Novation and with some distributors about some strategies to use as far as implementing and device management in a school setting. So that's probably going to be a video hopefully coming up in the near future on how you're going to manage. So this video is really going to be focused on a single device and the customization options that I think makes this really cool. So let's take a look at a couple of websites. Once you get your Launchpad device, one of the first things you're going to want to do is to go to the novationmusic.com website and register your device. So I've already registered my device here, but if I go to products and I select launch, and here it gives you a lot of information, overview specifically about the different model Launchpad. You also have the support tab. We're going to go to get started, select my product, which is the Launchpad product range, and then I'm going to select the Launchpad Mini because that's what we are working with. And this is going to give you a setup to get you started with your Launchpad Mini. Here you enter your serial number to register the product. And again, I've already done that. So let's take a look at my product page. So here you see I have three tabs at the top: my hardware, my software, my account. Here are the devices that I have right now, and here's my Mini. So the thing that's available on your hardware page, first under the documentation tab, you're going to get the Launchpad Mini user guide, which there's really great information there. And maybe in a later video I'll dig into the programmer's reference guide, but that's kind of a deep dive for right now, so we'll hold off on that. And then next to that, you'll notice you have a drop down for downloads and drivers. Now, the only reason you would need a driver for this is if you're using a Windows computer or a PC. If you're on a Mac or Apple device, it's going to sense the Launchpad as a just regular MIDI input device. Yeah, you'll only need the driver if you're using a Windows computer. Now, the center tab, my software, is going to give you a range of software that you have access to once you purchase one of the Launchpads. The one that I want to focus on is the one that's called Component. So you can download this as a standalone app. It's also web-based. And this is where the Launchpad really gets cool. So here is the Novation Components website, and here's where you can customize your Launchpad, which is a really super cool thing. Now, once you go here into Components, you're going to have some custom modes that are already uploaded, and you can see there's a couple grids here for Logic specifically. Logic has actually updated that software to integrate and implement the Launchpad that can be used with Logic in much more of a streamlined way than it just is used with GarageBand. But again, I think that's more of an advanced kind of level, so we're going to hold back on this and try to keep it nice and simple right now. And so I'm going to stay focused on GarageBand. Up here you can see I have some custom modes that are already laid out. And again, this is one of the things that I think is super, super cool about the Launchpad. We talked about the default setup where you can press the drums button and it gives you the 4x4 layout for the drum pads. And we talked about how it also can set up the Chromatic keyboard where you have the 4-octave range on a Chromatic keyboard. But it's also highly customizable too. So what I'm going to do just to demonstrate is click on this new custom mode. And here you can see I've got a blank Launchpad grid. And then over here you see that I have these options. Now, as far as the faders go, vertical, horizontal faders, that's something that I think can be really useful in Ableton. It could also be really useful in Logic. But again, we're focused on GarageBand, so we'll save that for another episode. The ones I'm going to focus on are these that fall under Notes. First of all, Chromatic Keyboard. I can click on this, drag it over, and drop, and I have 1 octave of the Chromatic Keyboard. Over here, I can select the octave that keyboard's going to be on. So the default is going to give you a range from C3 or middle C up to C7. But let's say that you wanted to give them a setup where that octave is going to fall either below that range or above that range. So you could select this, and instead let's go down to the first octave, and then I could add another line, and we'll make that the second octave. We'll add another octave, and we'll leave that at the default 3, and then we'll add one more, and we'll change this to octave 4. So now I have this set up as a Chromatic Keyboard, but instead of running from C3 to C7, this one's going to run from C1 up to C5, which will be the top one. So from here, I'm going to save it, and when I click Save As, I can call this my C1 to C5 Chromatic and save. Once I have that saved, I can send it directly to the device, or if I go back to this Save button, I have this option to download custom mode as an SYX file. That is a MIDI data file. So you can download this as a file, and then that file you can share with your students. Say you're using Google Classroom or Schoology or Blackboard, whatever learning management system you use, you can share that file with your students. If I'm going to send it to my Launchpad Mini, this is what's going to happen. So if I click Send, it's going to give me 3 boxes. Select Custom Mode, 1, 2, and 3. Now those 3 buttons are going to be the custom buttons we talked about earlier, which are labeled on the Launchpad to be drums, keys, and user. So typically with my classes starting off, I will leave that number 1 box to be the drum grid layout. 2 is going to be the standard Chromatic keyboard. So if I wanted to add this one, I can add it to custom mode number 3, overwrite custom mode. And now when I go and I click that user button on my Launchpad, which you're going to find up here, you're going to get the Chromatic keyboard from C1 to C5. If you then went and clicked on the keys button next to it under these custom buttons, that would look exactly the same, but it's going to switch your range from the C3 up to the C7. To just give you an idea of how that's going to work, let's go over to GarageBand. So I have a track set up. So here's my original Chromatic setup. So my bottom, that's my now just by pressing that user button where I've just uploaded that new custom mode, now that shifts it to that lower octave. Now, let's go back and look at some other options. Again, I'm going to come to create a new custom mode. And this time, let's take a look at the drum grid. And this is an option that I think is really pretty cool. So if I click on this and drag it over, it's going to drop one 4x4 grid. And you'll see it says C1. And if you remember from an earlier video, that's really important because on most DAWs, the drum sounds or samples are going to be programmed in that range starting from C1, generally from C1 up to about C3. If I wanted to change that to shift it to a lower octave, I could, because sometimes there are sounds that are going to exist below C1. So let's change this one to C0. 0. And then I'm going to come back and add another drum pad. I could change the color of this one if I wanted to. Let's do a nice green. And I'm going to make that one C1. So with this setup, this is going to be my kick and my snare. This is going to be the C1. This is going to be the C0 on the piano roll view in the DAW. So that's a way that you can extend those drum sounds that you get below C1. Now here's one of the things I think is really cool. So in addition to having those two drum grids, I can now go back and add a chromatic octave above it, and I can add, say, a second chromatic octave, and I'm going to shift this up to C4. And so now I've got drum grids on the bottom, I got my chromatic keyboard up top, and I'm going to send this to my Launchpad. I'm going to overwrite custom mode number 3. And that's one of the limitations of the Mini, is that you only have 3 custom mode slots. Later, when I talk about the Launchpad X, you actually get 1 additional slot, so you have 4 custom slots you can use. With the Launchpad Pro, you actually get 8. So the Mini is limited in that way, but I think it's still super usable for a really affordable price. So once I push this out to the Mini, now if I go back to GarageBand and say I want to work with my piano track, I've got those 2 octaves of chromatic keys on the top, but now if I click on my drum track below, I've got my drum pads programmed on the bottom. So that's all the C1 going up, but now remember I've also added some of the other sounds that extend down below C1 on the piano roll. So if I did take a look at this on the piano roll, so there's my C1, and you can see I do get sounds down to about E0 is where it stops, I think. So that's where that pad on the left comes in, and you can see how it's extending down below C1 while I still have the pad on the right that gives me this range of sounds up. So yeah, so that's really cool. So now you can switch back from very quickly and easily from your drum pad layout to your chromatic keyboard layout. That's going to do it for this episode of how you can implement and use the Novation Launchpad Mini with any DAW that you might be using in your music tech lab. If you found this video to be helpful, I'd really super appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe and those like buttons. If you have colleagues or other teacher friends that are teaching music technology that might find these videos helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you would let them know about it. Spread the word. As always, if there's ever anything that I can do to be a resource or a help for you, let me know. You can contact me at heath@mutechteachernet.com. I always encourage you to visit the website, www.mutechteachernet.com. And you can find me on Facebook at MutechTeacherNet or on Twitter at MutechTeachNet. It's a little bit different on Twitter, but you can find me those ways too. In the meantime, I wish all of you great success with your students. And as always, here with the Music Technology Teacher Network, we're here to advocate, support, inspire, and create.